This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Bean. Here with me is Mr. Jim Marshall. Jim is the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomenon, which greatly aids in the understanding of people, and he wrote about in his book Septemics. Today we're going to be diving in to a little bit of that book to help to understand it a little bit more. Jim, how are you today?
Hi, Chris. Glad to see you.
All right, so today we're going to get into the scale of exchange. Let me just share the screen. All right, Jim, it's all yours.
Okay, well, this scale completely undercuts the entire subject of economics, which is to say, if you understand this scale, you will have an understanding of economics beyond what most people have, including all these people that have graduate degrees in the subject. It's really about exchange. And that's mostly what human interaction is about. We think of that mostly in a financial or commercial context, but everything you do is an exchange of some kind. Now, this is a spiral scale, meaning there is an apparent congruence between level 1 and 7. And you want to take care to not make the catastrophic mistake of mistaking somebody at one level for the other level, because it's the largest mistake you can make. This is a gradual scale, meaning there is an infinitude of gradations between each of the levels. You move up this or down this gradually. And it's a general scale, meaning you spot a certain level for the subject and you're done. It's not context driven. Now, it's possible to have more than one area to use this in, which is true for some other general scales, but generally it makes sense to think of this as a general scale, meaning once you find it, you're done with that application of it. And then, of course, you can focus on moving up. Now, what are we measuring with this scale? This is the thing that people seem to miss. We're measuring trust. Exchange is about trust. So above level 1, you have complete trust, which is, of course, unattainable. And below level 7, you have no trust, which is equally unattainable. But that is the gradation here. As you go further, as you have higher trust, you have a higher level of exchange. And a lot of the problems that people have with exchange is around the area of trust. So that's what a confidence man is about. A confidence man is appropriately named because he gets you to trust him. And so he gets you to exchange with him at a higher level than he deserves. And that's how you get fleeced. Now, the government does this to you 7 days a week. They're perpetually in a state of deceiving you about the money they're going to take from you, how they're going to take it, why they're going to take it, what they're going to do with it. It is just a concatenation of lies to get you to let go of your money so that they can have it. Which is why the United States is more than $34 trillion in debt, which is unlike anything that's ever happened before in the history of the world. So let's start this at the bottom. Now, the most basic form of exchange is taking. Now, most people say taking. How is taking a form of exchange? Well, actually, it's the form of exchange that is most widely in use. When the government taxes you, they're taking your funds. This is not charity. If you don't pay your taxes, they send a guy eventually who will put handcuffs on you and take you away and lock you up in prison, like they did to Al Capone. So how is the taking done? What is the method of transfer? And basically, this is by either force or deceit. So the con man does it by deceit. The armed robber does it by force. And the government does it by both. And when I say the government, I mean all government. all governments at all levels in all countries take. But let me tell you how this is an exchange so that you understand the context. Let's say the mafia. The mafia really started out 100 years ago with what they call a collection racket, a protection racket, meaning they would come into your store and they would say, you give us $10 a week and we will protect you. And many of the people initially said, I don't need protection. Nobody's bothering me. And they'll say, well, if anything does happen, you come to us and we'll take care of it. Now, if the guy still didn't go along with it, then they would say, well, look, think of it this way. You pay us $10 a week and you get to stay in business because we won't throw a bomb through the window of your store. And you'll get to stay out of the hospital because we won't break both of your legs for not paying. See, that's an exchange. And the guy thinks about it and says, well, that's a good deal. I get to give him $10 and I get to keep my legs the way they are. And I get to keep my store in business instead of being blown up. So it works. You see, that's why the racket worked, because people are willing to go along with that. So the deceit part was when they said, well, we'll protect you. See, that's the con. And then if you don't go along with it, then the force comes in. They say, well, we'll blow up your store. The government does exactly the same thing. You pay us your taxes, or else we will clean out your bank account, we'll take away your house, and we'll put you in prison. It's the same thing. And I have often said that government is the best organized crime there is. They are better organized than the mafia or the Russian mob. And because they're so well organized, they do this with impunity. There's really nothing you can do about it. So that is level 7, taking. Now, that's what you have in an anarchy, like on the frontier. If you were a trapper and the Indians came upon you, they would take your horse, they would take your gun, they would take your food. And they may or may not let you live because you were going to die anyway with no horse, no gun, and no food. Excuse me. So up from that is barter. Barter is where you trade an object for an object. Now, this is how primitive civilizations and ancient civilizations objected, how they functioned. So you would have one farmer next to another farmer. Farmer A has a surplus of eggs. Farmer B has a surplus of apples. So they trade eggs for apples and everybody's happy. Okay? This is very good because it's safe. You don't have to trust anybody. You see, it requires very little trust. That's why it's level 6. It's just up from 7. That's barter. And that worked for a long time. Now, when you try to get to a more sophisticated level of commerce, it starts to break down. It doesn't work as well. So then you get into 5, which is a substitute for the object, a substitute for the eggs, for the apples. And this is a convenient medium. Different societies had different ways of doing this. Now, in America, we have the term a buck. I'll give you a buck, right? Meaning $1. Well, that came from the American frontier where they were talking about literally the skin of a buck, which is a male deer. So they'd kill the deer, eat the meat, and they would save the skin. And so the skin would be something you would have after you tanned it. You would have this hide, and you could trade it to somebody. You could say, well, look, I'll give you this hide, which they called a buck, because it was what was left of the buck. And you'd give me the eggs. Okay, see? And then that guy would take that skin and then he might trade it to the guy next to him for the apples. So you have a convenient medium. And that's sort of a primitive form of money. Now, in Japan, for example, they use bushels of rice because that's what they dealt in. There was lots of rice. And so they'd say, well, okay, I'll give you this horse for 3 bushels of rice. No, I want 4. Okay, 4. See, that was their convenient medium. Could be anything. Now, what happened early on is when metallurgy began, and this goes all the way back to the Bronze Age, which is like 2000, 3000 BC, they had bronze objects, and that was convenient medium. They could trade bronze or trade bronze objects. So I have this bronze sword, and I'll trade it to you for 6 bushels of apples. So eventually, the metal, they learned about gold and silver, and it became coinage, which is level 4, which is a standard valuable. So instead of just doing this in a kind of haphazard way, it became standardized where they would strike the silver or the gold into a coin, and they would trade the coin for the object. So by the time you get to the Greeks, that's what you had. You had coinage. So it's a standard valuable. The thing itself is it's gold or silver or copper, which has an intrinsic value. Okay, there's nothing abstract about this, but it's just standardized. So a guy would say, okay, you give me 3 pieces of silver and I'll give you this horse. Okay, so they make a deal. Now this guy has 3 pieces of silver and he goes and he trades one of them for a bushel of apples. See, and he has 2 left that he can use for eggs. So that's 4, a standard valuable. Then after that, it goes into cash, which is an abstraction. Now, most people today don't know that several hundred years ago, when people first got the idea of paper money, in many parts of the world, it was laughed at. So let me see if I got this right. I'm going to give you this horse, and you're going to give me 2 pieces of paper. What kind of a deal is that? That's ridiculous. What am I going to do with this? Well, you see, this represents pounds of silver. And you could go to the exchequer in England, and they'll give you silver for this. But a lot of people didn't buy it. And of course, there are innumerable examples in history. There was this term after the Revolutionary War, the Continental Congress had printed money, which had no value at all after a while. And we had the term that came into usage, not worth a continental. Most people don't know that today, but in American history, they'd say, oh, that's not worth a continental, meaning a continental dollar. So it's an abstraction. So now, when you used to have in America silver certificates. If you looked at the dollar, it said on it, silver certificate. You could turn that into the Treasury and they would give you silver for it. They did away with that almost 100 years ago. No more silver certificates. Now it just says legal tender. Now we're going into CBDC, which is not even a piece of paper. And of course, most non-governmental financial people are leery, chary of CBDC. They don't like the idea, with good reason. So when you get to cash, there has to be a high degree of trust. because if you have inflation, it's worth nothing. So we have in the Weimar Republic in Germany, people going to the supermarket or the market. They didn't have the word supermarket with a wheelbarrow of money because it had inflated to the point that you would fill up a wheelbarrow in order to buy your groceries. That's how worthless the money was. And that is a lot what led eventually to the Nazis taking over. And in the first 6 years of his reign, Hitler actually straightened all of that out. I have often said you can get a lot done if you're willing to kill people, which is how the mafia works. They get a lot done because they're willing to kill people. So that's what governments do. They can get things done because they're willing to kill people. Okay, if you oppose them, they get rid of you. So that's up to the level of cash, which the globalist fascists for some time now have been trying to get rid of. And they want to go to level 2, which is credit. Now, you see, we're getting to a high level of trust. If you trust the people in the federal government, you are an idiot. They cannot be trusted. They prove 7 days a week that they cannot be trusted because they lie to you continuously. Many people are getting hip to this. For example, the Democrats have been telling the blacks for 60 years now, we're going to straighten out all your problems, and they never did. And so a lot of blacks now are saying, these people have been promising us this since before I was born. I don't believe them anymore. Which is why the Republican share of the black vote is consistently going up now, because these people have been lied to so many times now, they simply don't believe it anymore. In other words, they don't trust. So when you get to credit, it's trust, right? You go in, you show them this piece of plastic, and they let you go home with 200 pounds of groceries. Okay. So what is that? It's a record. Because we have computers now, they can instantaneously check your record. So you put the card in the machine, and this computer, which is a global system, tells them that you have a certain amount of credit, and they allow you to take the product, and then the money goes to them. But again, that requires trust. And so, of course, there are always criminals around who are going to use whatever system is in place to get things for themselves. So obviously, those people cannot be trusted. So you have people who have bad credit records. That means they're not trusted. So if you try to get an apartment and you have a bad credit standing, very often they'll say, sorry, you didn't pass the credit check. We're not going to rent to you. Okay? They don't trust you because your record is not good. Beyond that, the next level is honor, which is one's word. Now, if your word is good, people will know you're a person of honor and they will allow exchange to occur. For example, I have a reputation. If I go to somebody and I say, look, loan me $50, I'll give it back to you on Thursday, the guy will give me the $50 because I have such a record of trust. People say, if Jim says he's going to give it back to you on Thursday, unless he dies, you will get it on Thursday. And that's what happens. I show up on Thursday. Here's the $50. Thank you very much. Well, there are not a lot of people that have that level of honor. And so when you have a close friend, for example, a close friend comes to you and says, look, trying to make my mortgage, can you loan me $200 until next month? Okay, see, because you trust him. So his word is the basis of the transfer, his word alone. So amongst people who trust one another, that's good enough. The question is, how do you know if the person can be trusted or not? Now, if you've known the person for many years and you've observed him, you see this is a guy who always shows up on time, never goes into arrears, always pays his bill, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so if his account goes a little below zero, that's fine. They tell him, well, you owe us $10, okay, and he comes in the next time and he pays it. So that's the scale of exchange, and this is what you should be looking at if you're exchanging with anybody. How trustworthy is this person? So the criminals who control the world, which I refer to as globalist fascists, are trying to install CBDC, central bank digital currency, so that they have complete control over everything. Now, there has been discussion for many decades now about getting rid of cash. Now, to the extent that the people are in control of their governments, the people can stop this from happening. Unfortunately, I don't think there are any honest governments, and I don't think there are any governments that are actually under the control of the people anymore. Now, of course, it's a matter of degree. But, for example, I live in Arizona, and I can tell you, because I pay close attention to this, there has not been an honest election in Arizona in many years. In the last election, Kerry Lake, 1 week before the election, was ahead by 11 points. Then she winds up losing after the most dysfunctional election I have ever seen. They had plenty of time to bring in phony votes, okay, and install a governor who won by a tiny margin. Now, how you can possibly go from being 11 points ahead in the polls to losing in 1 week, there's only one explanation for that, which is you're dealing with criminals. Now, it's common knowledge in Arizona. I'm just an ordinary Arizona, and it's known to me that the Mexican cartels have pretty much taken over the state. They bribed the election officials. They bribed the judges. So when Kerry Lake went to court to say, look, this was a dysfunctional election, and she had all this evidence, and by the way, I watched the whole trial. They said, sorry, you lose. So if you bribe the election officials, and then you bribe the judges so that there's no recourse, that's how you get what's going on in Arizona. What was a red state is now a blue state. How does that happen? It happens because these people cannot be trusted. So that's why many people say we should go back to paper ballots and have the election on one day, so there's not time for all of this chicanery to go on. And you have to enforce people overseeing this. In the last election, the poll watchers were kept so far away from the people counting that they couldn't see what was going on. They said, no, you can't come in here. Okay? That's just a stolen election. Now, there was a poll taken shortly thereafter, and if I recall, 84% of Arizonans did not trust the result of that election. Now, when you get to 84% of anything in any poll, that's close to an absolute. Because there are people around who are so crazy that if you said, let's cut off the left small finger of every child that's born, they'd say, that's a good idea. They're just crazy people. And there are people who are just so ignorant, they have no idea what's going on. Election? What election? What's an election? Ballot? What's a ballot? So obviously, those people can be fleeced. The government has done a very efficient job of dumbing down the population, dumbing them down and doping them up, which is two forms of the same thing because the drugs make you stupid, because they all cause brain damage. So now you have a populace of people who will believe anything, which is why you have now in the United States people in government coming out telling blatant lies that everybody on both sides know is not true, except for a few idiots who will believe anything. Yes, I have a unicorn at home. I have to go home and feed my unicorn. Oh, I see. So this is all about trust. So this is the way you have to conduct your exchanges. You have to pay close attention to how trustworthy is this. In other words, if you're going to buy a CD, well, is this insured by the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation? If not, sorry, I don't trust you. See, it's got to be insured. And the FDIC insures up to $250,000. So you should limit your deposit to $250,000. Now, this is a problem for big corporations because they have vast billions, far beyond what the FDIC insures, which is why the government has to come in, as they did not long ago in Silicon Valley, and bail out the bank. Now, of course, that bank was sold to another bank, but still there was a bailout. So this is what exchange is about. And it's not just business. You know, so for example, if a woman says she loves you, how trustworthy is that? Does she really mean that? Or is that just what she's saying because she wants to get into your pants? See, you have to be able to trust. And so this takes study, attention, patience. You cannot, if you are careless, you will be fleeced. It's only a matter of time. So you have to know the area you're dealing in, you have to know the person. And for example, I had somebody who I did business with some years ago, and I insisted on a certified check. And I got the certified check, I deposited it, it bounced. Whoever heard of a certified check bouncing? It was a fraudulent check. It was a forgery. So, you know, there are people whose their whole lives are about how am I going to get money from other people without doing any work? They're criminals. So, and unfortunately, in most countries, the governments are filled with criminals. When you get an honest person in, like when Abraham Lincoln, known as Honest Abe, was elected in 1860, it started a war. Just the fact that he was elected was enough to start the Civil War. They weren't going to have this honest guy come in. So this is what goes on. And you better pay attention to exchange based on trust. Why should you trust some bank? Why should you trust the Fed? Why should you trust any politician? So if you don't pay attention because you're busy watching basketball and football games, you're going to get fleeced. Because while you're not paying attention, they're going to pull a scam on you. And it's done regularly. So you better pay attention. Any questions?
No questions. Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Scale of communication. Nothing I say could possibly convey how important this scale is. This one scale can dramatically improve your entire life across all of your dynamics, your personal life, your financial life, your family, everything else. Because this book is about human interaction. And the interaction is really a synonym of communication. How do you interact? You interact by communicating. So if you just get the book and just read this one chapter and follow the instructions therein, it will dramatically improve your life. Because there are so few people who have communication skills that if you develop communication skills, you will stand out. Now, this is a linear scale, meaning there's no apparent congruence between level 1 and 7. It's a quantum scale, meaning there's nothing in between the two. These levels are completely separate. These are separate skills, actually, 7 separate skills. There's nothing in between. And it's a specific skill, meaning it has to do with context. How do you communicate to your wife? How do you communicate to your children? How do you communicate to your boss? How do you communicate to your pastor? And so forth. So a person can have different levels of communication for different contexts. Now, this is another one of the many skills. There are 7 of them that have this plus minus factor in them, where it says direction. Now, as I have explained before, the plus minus does not mean good or bad. It means inflow or outflow. Or to put it in a more humanistic way, it means reach and withdraw. In a physical science way, you talk about inflow, outflow, like the water in your pipes. It flows in and it flows out. But it makes more sense when you're talking about people to say that in terms of reach and withdraw. In other words, when you outflow to somebody, you're reaching for the person. And when you inflow from somebody, you're withdrawing from the person. So what people are doing all the time is reaching and withdrawing. So when you like somebody, you reach to that person. You say, "Hi, Joe," and you shake his hand. When you don't like somebody, you withdraw from that person. So you see somebody who looks like a drug addict and a criminal, and you just stay away from him. Okay? So that's reach and withdraw. Now, these 7 levels of the scale are 7 skills that communication consists of. In other words, the subject of communication has 7 aspects to it. And some of them are reaching and some of them are withdrawing. So the way this scale proceeds, it's like walking. You walk on your left leg, you walk on your right leg, you walk on your left leg, you walk on your right leg. So similarly, when you communicate with somebody, first you reach and then you withdraw, and then you reach and then you withdraw, and then you reach. Well, you can see this all the time. You see Joe and you say, "Hi, Joe, how are you?" Right? That's reaching. And then Joe says, "Oh, not so good. I had a headache yesterday." See, you are now inflowing, which is a withdrawal. You're withdrawn while he outflows this communication to you. You see? So you can see this easily in communication. It's reaching and withdrawing. However, there are very specific ways of reaching and withdrawing that make communication work. Now, normally I start at the bottom of the scale, but today I'm going to start at the top of the scale because everyone enters at level 1. When you communicate with somebody, the first thing that has to happen is you have to be present. Have you ever spoken to somebody who was not there? It's like there's this cliche, the lights are on, but nobody's home. His body is there, but he's nowhere around. So you have some guy, he's in a daydream, and you say, "Do you have the statistics from yesterday?" And he doesn't even respond. You say, "Hello, Joe? What? Did you say something?" See, he was daydreaming about his girlfriend, Alice. He wasn't even present in the room. He was not there. So now you got him a little bit present, see? And you say again, I was asking you if you have the statistics from yesterday. Oh, yes, I have them. See, he can answer it now because he's present. So presence is an outflow. Now, this is not obvious. When you are being present, you are flowing out into the environment. You're saying, I am here. I am present. It's an outflow. You see, when a person is not present, he's obviously withdrawn. Well, that's an inflow. So, in order to be present, you have to outflow. So, that's the first thing you have to do. Before you say anything, you have to be present, which is an outflow. When you come to the person, you outflow to the person. You permeate the person. And that's covered in the scale of permeation, which is an individual scale, which we covered earlier. Now, once you're present, the next thing you do is observe. You are there. So you walk into a room, right? That's an outflow. You walk into a room, and what do? You observe, you look around. Oh, this is the living room. I see there's the TV, there's the couch, there's the ottoman. See? And you're inspecting. Okay, that's an inflow. So you're inflowing at that point when you observe. So that's the second thing you have to do is observe. Now remember, nothing has been said yet. You're present and you're observing. What is the next thing? The next thing is poise. Poise is composure. You must maintain some kind of poise. So, for example, a woman comes into a room. She observes that there's a spider on the floor and she screams and runs out of the room. Right? That person's composure was non-existent. She couldn't maintain her poise in the presence of the spider. This is a cliche. You know, you see women, there's a mouse in the room, so they jump up on a chair. So poise is an outflow. Now, you see this in beauty contests. They talk about they want the contestants to show poise, you see, which is composure. So it's not enough to be pretty. You have to be poised to win a beauty contest. Same thing happens in the military. When you're standing at attention, you have to be poised. You are composed. That's why the platoon commander says, attention, and you all snap to attention. See, you are now composed, which is what he wants you to be, which is an outflow. Poise is like saying, I'm here, I'm paying attention, and you're not flustering me. It's an outflow. The next thing you do is encourage. Now, this is sorely lacking. Most people do not understand this. In order for communication to occur, there must be encouragement. So you walk into a store, you look at the person, you smile, you say hello. See, that's encouragement. You're inviting that person to communicate back to you. If you don't do that, the person might not communicate to you. So you see, encouragement is an inflow. It's an invitation. You're sort of withdrawn somewhat to allow this person to communicate to you. That's why you encourage the person. So that's why it's smart to say, you call in somebody, you say, now look, Smith, I understand you're a hard worker, you're a nice guy, I like you. But, and then you tell them the problem. See, that's smart. That boss just encouraged his worker. He encouraged him a little bit. He didn't say, get in here, you bum, I'm going to dress you down. That's discouragement. You don't have communication when there's discouragement. So you have to first encourage the person, see? And after the but, then the boss says, your statistics have been down for 2 weeks now. What's going on? You see? And because he encouraged him, there's a better chance that Smith is going to come back to him and say, well, My wife has the flu, my kid has a broken leg, et cetera, et cetera. See, he's kind of explaining what's going on. See, he's actually in level 5 now. He's expressing. So after you encourage the person, then the person will express himself, which is a conveyance. He conveys something to you. So when you say to somebody, I like vanilla ice cream, that's an expression. That's an outflow. You are conveying information to the person. Now we're at level 5. This is the first level at which you're actually having substantive communication. But let's go back to 4 because I want to explain. You don't have to talk to encourage somebody. You can just say, Right? Listen to people. Somebody's talking and you're sort of giving a little head nod. You're giving him a little bit of a grunt. You're sort of telling him, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying. Oh, go ahead, tell me more. Which is kind of a natural thing that most people will do. So you don't have to use words. You don't have to use sounds at all. Just smiling and nodding, or you can even use your hands to gesture. You can sort of make a gesture that says, tell me more. So just looking at the person in rapt attention tends to invite them to communicate. That encourages the person, right? So if you have some beautiful woman and she's bothered by guys all the time, she doesn't look at you because she doesn't want you to say, where have you been all my life? Right? She just wants to be left alone. So she doesn't look at you. She looks at her cell phone. You see, that is a way of not encouraging you. She doesn't want to encourage you because this woman has men coming after her 8 times a day. So she's not going to encourage anybody. Okay, so now we've gone through levels 1 through 4 without necessarily using words. Now at level 5, then you use words. This is why people have trouble communicating. They don't do 1, 2, 3, and 4. They just do 5. Somebody comes into this room and says, Joe got divorced. He didn't establish his presence. He didn't observe that you're busy doing something. He didn't demonstrate any poise. He didn't encourage you. He just blurted it out. That's rude. If you want to have good communication, you have to do 1, 2, 3, and 4. First, you have to be present. Then you observe. So, like, if you go into a room and you see that someone looks very upset, you're probably not going to tell them whatever you came to tell them. Because there's obviously, you can see by observing them that they are not ready to have a discussion. You see, if a guy's angry, he does not want to hear that the Knicks just lost their game because he's busy being angry. So you say, oh, I'm not going to say anything about it. That's smart. Just let him be angry. See? But in order to do that, you have to observe him. So poise is extremely important. If you are poised, people will communicate with you because you're poised. You are composed. You don't look like a nut or a maniac or somebody who's going to yell at them. See? So you have to be composed, and then you have to encourage the person. Then the person will tell you. So 5, most people know about. The problem is most people don't know about 1, 2, 3, and 4. Obviously, 5 is an outflow. You're expressing something. You're saying, I won $10 playing poker. See, that's your expression. It's an outflow. It's an obvious outflow. Now, the next thing is response. after there's an expression, there has to be a response. Now, so how do you respond? Now, response is another way of saying handling. You have to handle it. So let's say somebody comes to you and says, I've got a terrible headache. You need to handle that. So how do you handle it? You say, oh, really? When did that start? Oh, it's been going on for an hour now. Oh, well, would you like some Tylenol for that? Oh, that's a good idea. Okay, here, let me get some. So you get the Tylenol and say, here's the Tylenol. See, you're handling his expression. It's an inflow. You're not outflowing to this guy. This is a big inflow. Tell me about your headache. Tell me what I can do about it. Would you like some Tylenol? Okay. How many Tylenol do you want? Do you want water with the Tylenol? How much water do you want? Would you like to sit down? You see, you're handling it. So your wife comes to the breakfast table and says, I want a divorce. Right? That's her expression. If you have any interest whatsoever in continuing a relationship with her, you have to handle that. You have to say, why? What's going on? What's the problem? What did I do? See, you have to have a response there. You're inflowing. And by inflowing, you're sort of handling her expression. Well, you don't, blah, 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 blah. See? So that's really important. So this is another way that most communications break down. You don't handle the thing. So guy comes home from work and his wife says, I had a terrible day today. The sink didn't work and my appointment got canceled and the kid threw up. And he says, look, I don't want to hear it. I had a bad day too. Big mistake. He did not handle her expression. He should be saying, no matter what happened to him, even if he was wrong the way home, he needs to say, really, tell me what happened. Tell me all about it. What can I do about this? How can I help you? Would you like a hug? You better handle it. See? So he handles the wife. Then after there's a little hugging and she starts to smile, then you say, well, I had a difficult day too. See, then she's able to listen to it because you accepted her expression by inflowing it. This is really important. You have to handle things. The reason why bands break up, the reason why marriages break up, the reason why siblings don't deal with one another is because there was no handling of the expression. So if somebody says something to you, especially it's of an alarming nature, you have to handle it. You can't say, don't bother me with that. I don't want to hear about it. Because that's the end of the communication right there. Now, the last thing is termination. And this is done by acknowledgement. In a sense, level 7 is the reverse vector of level 4. See, 4 is an inflow, 5 is an outflow. When you encourage somebody, you're getting them to talk. When you acknowledge somebody, you're getting them to stop talking. So somebody comes in and tells you, boppity, 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 bop, and it was all terrible. You say, okay, I understand. See, you're acknowledging him. And in a sense, that terminates that communication. Now you can go on to something else. If you don't acknowledge the person, the cycle does not complete. So you have to outflow to the person an acknowledgement. See, this is not the same as 6. 6 is an inflow, 7 is an outflow. So somebody comes up to you and says, I lost $35 playing poker last night. And you say, no kidding. See, you acknowledged him. So you have to sort of decide how much response is necessary and when is the time to terminate. So when the husband comes home and the wife had a terrible day and he listens to all this stuff, he's inflowing. And then at some point, he acknowledges her. He says, well, I can see why you're unhappy because I understand. See, he acknowledges it. That terminates it. That is an outflow to her saying, I got it. And the cycle is completed. And then he can go on to saying, well, I had trouble at work today. See, that's a new cycle of communication. Now he's expressing himself. But before he expresses himself, he better do 1, 2, 3, and 4. So first you have to be present. You have to be in the room paying attention. Then you have to observe what's going on here. Is this person ready to discuss the bowling team or not? See, you have to make that judgment. And then before you do it, you have to be poised. And then you have to encourage the person in some way by smiling. Hello. You don't just walk in and blurt it out. You have to encourage the person. So let's say a guy goes to visit his mother, right? So he's present and he observes what's going on. He sees her, okay, she's in a good state of mind. Then he's composed, see? Then he encourages her, says, hi, Mom, gives her a kiss. Then he says, I came over to tell you that I put my house up for sale. You see? So he did 1, 2, 3, and 4 before he did 5. Now, if she says to him, well, that's interesting, but I had a big fight with your father today. He better handle that. That requires a response. See? So he's in flow. Oh, tell me about it. What happened? You see? He wants to hear about it. It's inflowing, inflowing, inflowing. And when it looks like she said enough, you terminate. You said, okay, I understand. Thank you for telling me about that. See, then he can go back to telling her about the house. And in fact, she might even say, so how much did you list it for? You see? So she goes right back into this next subject matter. So this is like a little dance that you do with a person. You know, when you're dancing, you don't want to step on the person's foot. So your foot cannot go where their foot is. You can't zig when they zag. You have to get in sync. So that's what dancing is about. And that's why dancing is a big part of courting, because you're sort of getting the man and the woman into sync. You see, they're playing the Blue Danube and they're doing a waltz together. And so they're kind of in sync doing this. So this sort of promotes communication, because in order to dance with somebody, you have to be doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. At the end, when the Blue Danube ends, everybody claps. See? The music. That's the termination. The dance is over. So you have to pay attention to this. So all of this requires attention. You have to have attention to these 7 levels. Now, before you can have attention to these 7 levels, you have to know they exist. And that's what this chapter is about. Now, in the book, I give drills to tell you how to develop these 7 skills. So you can actually sit down with somebody and drill being there, inspecting, being composed, inviting, conveying, handling, and acknowledging. And there's even another drill, which is for those who have trouble with all of this, which is to just try to get the person up to the point where he can be present. Sometimes you have a person who's so upset, they're not present. You can tell them something, they won't get it. They won't remember it. They won't comprehend it. And they're not present. You have to get them present. And there's another exercise, an eighth exercise, which sort of undercuts all of these to just sort of get the guy calmed down enough that he can be present. So that's what this is about. I can tell you, having been working with this material for most of my life, this gives you enormous power in dealing with people. The greatest landslide in American history was Ronald Reagan's 1984 landslide where he won 49 states. The only state he lost was the state of his opponent. Ronald Reagan was known as the great communicator. Okay, people just made this up who observed him. He had unbelievably good communication skills. Whether you agree with him or not, he had very good communication skills. So that's how he did it. He was able to communicate to people in general. It wasn't just Republicans who liked him. There's a whole category of voters called Reagan Democrats because he communicated to them, because his skills were so good. So that's how he did it. That's how he won that landslide. He had 4 years where he was able to connect with the people of America, and overwhelmingly, they wanted him to stay in office. That's what he had going for him, his communication skills. So I urge you to learn this, study it, and apply it anytime you're dealing with anybody. Now, of course, if you're not interested in somebody, if some panhandler comes up to you on the street and says, "Hey, buddy, can you spare a dime?" You don't want to talk to him. You don't even pay attention to him. Just keep going. That's up to you. So you're not going to have any communication with that person. But if you want to have communication with your wife or your kids or your husband or your boss or your pastor or anybody else or some prospect who you're trying to sell something to, this is how you do it. Any questions?
No questions. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Scale of allegiance.
Right. Now, this is one of the several scales that is a group manifestation of an individual scale. So as an individual scale, this manifests as the scale of identity, which is obviously an individual thing. Allegiance always involves more than one person, which is inherently a group thing. Other than that, these are two ways of saying the same thing. These two scales, the scale of identity and the scale of allegiance, align perfectly with one another. But one of them applies to a group and one of them applies to an individual. So in the scale of identity, it's how you think about yourself. In the scale of allegiance, it's how you think about others. Now, this is a spiral scale, meaning there is a risk of misconstruing 1 and 7, thinking a person is at 1 when he's at 7, or that he's at 7 when he's at 1, which is a catastrophic mistake. 7 says no allegiance, and 1 also says no allegiance. But 7 is no possible allegiance, and 1 is no need for allegiance. A person at level 7 is oblivious. He doesn't know that he doesn't know. He is just oblivious. So this is like a guy, he's just sitting there staring into space. He has no idea what's going on. Okay? As opposed to a person at level 1 is extroverted. His attention is out onto the environment. His attention is not into himself. It's out. Now, this is a quantum scale, meaning there is, when you change from level to level, you change instantaneously. There is no gradation. So you're at, for example, level 2, and then a billionth of a second later, you're at level 3. So this is a cognitive action. It's something that happens in the person's mind. Something happens, and he goes from level 2 to level 1. There's no gradation. Now, you could have factors contributing to his ability to change. For example, a guy is at level 3 and he's in therapy. Right? 3 is an indecisive person. And he has 6 months of therapy. And then he shows up one day and he says to his therapist, I decided I decided about this. I'm not indecisive anymore. I want to stay with my wife. See, he went up to level 2. So there were contributing factors, but the actual change is instantaneous. Something happened to him where it suddenly went click in his mind, and he changed. And this is a specific scale, meaning it's context driven. How is your allegiance to your family? How is your allegiance to your job? How is your allegiance to your church? How is your allegiance to your political party? And so forth. Now, what are we measuring here? We're actually measuring perception. This is not obvious. Allegiance is about perception. When a person goes down the scale, it's because his perception deteriorates. You see, that's why you start at level 1. You're extroverted. Well, extroverted is maximal perception. That is what extroversion means. Level 7, no possible allegiance, that's no perception. You're just completely out to lunch. So that is the gradation here. The vertical dotted line is you're going up in perception or down in perception. And this tells you how to fix this. So if a guy shows up for facilitation or counseling, right, he has some kind of perception problem. He doesn't know what's going on, right? Guy comes in to a counselor, a business counselor, says, I don't understand what's going on with my job. I work myself to death. I'm not making any money. See, clearly his perception is down. He just told you that because he says he doesn't understand. If his perception was high, he would understand. So when you talk to someone who's doing well, that person's perception is good. And when you talk to somebody who's doing badly, that person's perception is poor. And that tells you how to fix this. You have to fix the person's perception. Now, again, we have the in and out, or inflow and outflow factor, where level 1 is inflow, level 2 is outflow, level 3 is inflow, level 4 is outflow. So when a person goes down the scale, he goes either from outflowing to inflowing or from inflowing to outflowing. So that's how you go down and that's how you go up. And this actually helps you because you can assess somebody on the basis of, is this person inflowing or outflowing? And that helps you to figure out what level the person is at. For example, when a person is indecisive about something, he's withdrawn. That is a type of indecision. See, if you say to him, do you want to marry Gertrude or not? He can't make up his mind. See, that's telling you he's uncertain of his allegiance. He's withdrawn. So it's an inflow. Now, if the guy suddenly shows up and he's outflowing, you know that he's not at 3 anymore. It could be at 2, it could be 4. But you listen to what he says. If he says, I'm done with her, I don't want to see her anymore. Well, he went down to 4. From her point of view, he's an enemy now because he doesn't want to marry her. See, he's going to be mad about that. Or you could say, well, I decided I'm going to marry Gertrude. So now he's up to 2. See, either way, it's an outflow. So you can spot this based partially on inflow, outflow. So when a person is extroverted, what is he doing? He's absorbing data from his environment. He's paying attention. He's looking around. That's what extroverted means. He's paying attention. When a person is extroverted, he has no need for allegiance because he's extroverted. Everyone starts, meaning enters the scale at level 1, and then as the situation deteriorates, he goes down. And if you rehabilitate the situation, he starts going back up. But when a person has no allegiance at all, he's not on this scale. So you have some guy, let's say you have some club, right? You belong to the Elks. This guy doesn't know anything about the Elks, never heard of the Elks, doesn't know what they do. What's an Elk? You know? So he has no kind of allegiance even contemplated for the Elks. He's just extroverted. He's just sort of, you say to the guy, you know, I'm a member of the Elks. And he's extroverted. So he says, yeah, what's that? See, he's paying attention. He's perceiving. So let me go through how a person goes down this and then how you go back up. So this guy, you say, would you like to join the Elks? So he just looks at you and says, what are the Elks? See, that's extroversion. He's inflowing. So at some point you say, well, it's this group when we do charitable work and we have parties and dances and things, and there's a lot of camaraderie and such, and it's like a social group. Oh, really? So he's getting interested. So now he says, okay, I'll join up. See? So now he joins the Elks. He's now at level 2. He is certain of allegiance. He's an Elk. You were an Elk when you tried to get him into it, and now he's an Elk because he's into it. Now, this involves self-sacrifice. Why self-sacrifice? You're going to pay dues. You're going to cancel your appointment to play mahjong so that you can go to the Elks meeting. You see, you're going to leave the bowling team so you can go to the Elks. So there's always self-sacrifice. This is what military people like. They want you to be certain of allegiance. If you're in the French army, they want you to be certain of your allegiance to the French army. And because of that allegiance, you will sacrifice. So, well, I'm sorry, we're on bivouac. We're not allowed to make fires. You're just going to have to eat cold food. See? Self-sacrifice. It's an outflow. Self-sacrifice is necessarily an outflow. You're outflowing something to this group. So, like, for example, this guy now, he's going to sacrifice himself for the Elks because he's certain of allegiance. Oh, you need somebody to paint the meeting room. Well, I used to be a house painter. I'll do it. You see? And he goes in and he paints the meeting room. And all the Elks say, thank you. See? That's certain of allegiance, self-sacrifice. Now, at some point, he might decide, you know, I'm not enjoying this. He goes down to 3, uncertain of allegiance. He becomes indecisive. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I mean, it was a lot more fun playing mahjong with my friends and being on the bowling team than doing this. See, he hasn't left yet, but he's indecisive. He's withdrawn. He's looking into himself. He's not extroverted. He's introverted. An indecisive person is necessarily introverted. So this is uncertain of allegiance. He doesn't know if he wants it or not. So he shows up and he says, you know, I've been doing this for 3 months. I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. He's at level 3. So your job would be to get him back up to level 2 if you're an Elk. Now, at some point, he might say, you know, I'm done with this. And from the point of view of the group, that's a wrong allegiance. he's no longer, you no longer have his allegiance. See? So from to all the elk, Joe leaving the elk is a wrong allegiance. He has detached from the group. So he's sort of taken on the color of an enemy. He's an outsider now, you see? So when you say, I'm done with this, that's an outflow. Like you go to your girlfriend, you say, you know what? I know you've been cheating on me with Bill. We're done. See, that's an outflow. Now, if the deterioration continues, he'll have a lost allegiance, which is a betrayal. So this guy will go around saying, oh, yeah, this Elks Lodge is a joke. But don't bother with this. See, that's kind of a betrayal. He has lost his allegiance. So whatever allegiance he had to the elk no longer exists. So he betrays them. That is kind of an inflow. Because anytime you betray something, you withdraw from it. So withdrawal, that's what that little minus means. It means withdrawal. Now, if the deterioration continues, he goes into disorientation and it becomes chaos to him. So he asked him, what was it like being the Elks? You know, I don't really remember. It was, I left them and I don't think about it anymore. This guy is disoriented. Now, disoriented is an outflow. If you deal with a disoriented person, you will see it is an outflow. You get chaos. He's not withdrawn into himself. He's just sort of flopping around, making a mess. So disorientation is an outflow. So when this person is disoriented, it's not like he's sitting in the corner quietly thinking. There's chaos around him. So the next level down is oblivion, which is no possible allegiance. The person becomes oblivious. This guy doesn't even remember that he was ever in the Alps. Now you might say, well, how is that possible? Well, I'm telling you, it happens all the time. You can have a guy who dates some girl, he goes down this, he gets to the bottom, he doesn't even remember. So somebody who he hasn't seen in a while says, hey, Fred, how have you been? Are you still going out with Mary? He says, Mary who? Don't you remember Mary? You were going out with Mary? Was I going out with somebody named Mary? Yeah, you know, the Japanese girl, she drove a Maserati. No, I don't remember her. That guy is down at 7. He's oblivious. Now, if this guy were to go into therapy, he would suddenly say, you know, I just remembered. I used to have a girlfriend named Mary. She was Japanese and she drove a Maserati. I had forgotten all about her. See, he just went from 7 back up to 6. It's chaos in his mind. But you're going to get blah, 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 chaos. But he's not oblivious of it. See, that's an improvement. Now, if a guy stays in therapy, he'll go back up to 7 and say, you know, I realize now I betrayed her because we had said we were going to stay together. And then I cheated on her and went out with somebody else. And so, see, he's sort of realizing that he had betrayed her, which was lost allegiance. And then if he continues in therapy, he'll go up and he'll say, well, you know, I can see that that was wrong. I should have became an enemy to her because I abandoned her. And then if you continue, he'll go up to, yeah, you know, I can remember I was indecisive for some time. And he will become indecisive again. He'll say, well, you know, maybe I shouldn't have dumped Mary. Maybe I should have stayed with her. See, that's level 3. And then if you keep going, he'll say, you know, I can see that I, excuse me, treated her badly and I should make amends. So he contacts Mary and says, you know, Mary, I'm sorry. I haven't been in touch. And let me take you out to dinner for old time's sake. See, he's sort of sacrificing himself. So he goes out and he spends $50 on dinner. And if he continues in therapy, He'll get back up to 1. No need for an allegiance. He's extroverted. So he's not thinking about her anymore. You see, that's why this is a spiral scale. He's not thinking about her. He's just extroverted. He's just saying, well, who am I going to date now? You see, that's extroversion. He's not stuck in this whole thing that happened with Mary where they broke up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He forgot about her. Now, again, as with most scales, most people have most difficulty understanding the extremes of the scales. So most people say, not understand 7. Wait a minute, this guy's doesn't even remember. That's right, he's oblivious. Now, that doesn't always happen, but that's why most people don't have a reality on this. And a lot of people not have a reality on being extroverted. They won't understand how, this is like the guy who, he's not a Democrat, he's not a Republican, he's not a libertarian. He reads the news every day. He can tell you exactly what's going on. He's just not allied with anybody. He's just an informed person. Okay? What political party do you belong to? I don't belong to a political party. That doesn't mean the guy's oblivious. You see, that's the mistake. He might be the best informed guy in the room. His perception is very good. He sees exactly what's going on. And he can, if you discuss with him, he can analyze all the issues. But he's just not a part of any group. By the way, the largest category in American politics now is independents. There are more independents now than either Democrats or Republicans. So this is people saying, I'm not part of the Republicans and not part of the Democrats. They had enough. You see, they're just independents. Doesn't mean they're not going to vote. They may and they may not, but they're not certain of allegiance, which is level 2. That's what the party wants you to be, whatever party it is. If you're contributing to the Democratic Party, they want you to be certain of allegiance. See? And they keep sending you emails to make sure you're certain of allegiance. So there might come a point when you say, yeah, I'm not part of this anymore. I understand what's going on. I'm going to vote, but I'm not part of any of these groups. That is a liberated place to be. When a person has maximal perception, he's extroverted, and he has no need for allegiance. He says, why do I have to be a Republican? Why do I have to be a Democrat? Why do I have to be a Catholic? See, you could have somebody who knows the scriptures upside down, inside out, and backwards, but doesn't belong to any church. He just doesn't feel the need for a vicar. So he has no allegiance. He's not a Presbyterian. He's not a Seventh-day Adventist. He's not a Catholic. He's just a guy who knows a lot about Christianity. See, he's extroverted. He's not a member of any group. Any questions?
No questions. Very good. And I think that's probably a good place to stop for today. Jim, I
Yes.
want to tell you, thank you. All of these have been so helpful. And I want to, tell you, thank you again for putting them together, sharing them with us, and then taking the time to furthermore dive into each of them so that we can have a better understanding of them.
Right. That's why I wrote the book, for people like you.
Very good.
So that you'll be able to take this and understand what's going on around you and consequently lead a better life.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, listeners, come back next time as we wrap up our conversation with Jim and the journey through Septemics. Until then.